Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating medical cold case. Imagine a patient who's been suffering for years with these completely baffling symptoms, leaving even the very best specialists scratching their heads. Now, imagine an artificial intelligence stepping in, not just as a glorified search engine, but as a master medical detective capable of actually solving that cold case. Today, we're exploring an incredible new research paper on an AI model called RareDxR1, which is doing exactly that.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the rare disease crisis. Then, why current AI struggles. Third, training the master diagnostician. Fourth, the power of collaboration. And finally, a breakthrough in diagnosis.
Starting right off with part 1, the rare disease crisis and the millions of medical cold cases. 4.8 years. That is the average diagnostic delay for a patient with a rare disease. Just imagine bouncing from specialist to specialist, undergoing test after test for almost 5 years, all without getting a real answer. For these patients, their lives effectively turn into agonizing, unresolved medical cold cases.
Now, the word rare might make it sound like a niche issue, but it's really not. By definition, sure, a rare disease affects fewer than 1 in 2,000 people. But because there are between 7,000 and 10,000 different types of these diseases out there globally, they collectively impact roughly 300 million people. That's a massive global health crisis basically hidden in plain sight.
So you might be wondering, why is diagnosing these conditions so incredibly tough? Well, rare disease diagnosis, or RDD, isn't just about glancing at a patient chart. It requires this highly sophisticated dual-process capability. First, a physician has to meticulously parse unstructured, often super messy patient narratives just to find hidden clues. Then, they have to perform a complex differential diagnosis, weighing all sorts of conflicting evidence against a vast array of potential conditions. It's literally like finding a needle in a haystack, and then having to figure out exactly which factory manufactured that specific needle.
Which brings us to part 2, why current AI struggles, the flawed detectives.
You see, traditionally, computer-assisted diagnosis has relied on what we call structured phenotypes. That basically means forcing a patient's symptoms into rigid, predefined checkboxes. But doing this is lossy. You completely lose the nuances of the patient's actual story. In reality, clinical notes are unstructured, they're open domain, they're messy. Real life just doesn't fit neatly into a checkbox. And when older AI tries to force it, it completely misses the crucial subtleties you absolutely need for a rare diagnosis.
Now, what about the newer, highly advanced, large language models? Well, they actually face some major roadblocks here too. First off, general medical LLMs simply lack the long-tail knowledge. They just haven't ingested enough data about diseases that only affect a handful of people. Second, while general reasoning models are fantastic at, say, formal math logic, they really struggle with the probabilistic, gray area nature of clinical diagnosis. And perhaps the biggest issue, when current models guess wrong, they just discard that failed reasoning, totally wasting a golden opportunity to learn from their mistakes. They just don't have the internalized medical logic to connect the dots.
All right, let's move on to Section 3, Training the Master Diagnostician. Enter RareDxR1.
To conquer these exact limitations, researchers built an end-to-end reasoning-centric model utilizing a clever two-stage training framework for RareDxR1. Instead of relying on rigid checkboxes or constantly having to search external databases, this architecture actually forces the AI to deeply internalize fragmented rare disease knowledge right into its own parameters. So during stage 1, it essentially builds a massive medical library inside its own neural network, laying a rock-solid foundation of knowledge and reasoning.
But here is where it gets really cool. How does it learn to actually reason? The researchers used a technique called reflection-enhanced reasoning sampling, or RAERS. Instead of just throwing away its incorrect guesses, the model is forced to act like a master sleuth. When it goes down an initial failed reasoning path, it's prompted to synthesize retrieved medical knowledge and expert feedback, reflect on its own logical fallacies, and then self-correct to derive the accurate diagnosis. It gets smarter precisely by analyzing its own failures.
And once that foundation is set, the AI undergoes rigorous reinforcement learning through a dual-level curriculum. You can think of this kind of like medical school exams that progressively get harder and harder. The curriculum escalates in both task difficulty and case difficulty. By combining simple medical cases with really complex reasoning tasks, the model masters multi-step logic.
And by combining incredibly hard cases with simpler tasks, it prioritizes the recall of obscure, rare disease facts. It's a dual approach that ensures the AI is incredibly well-rounded.
That brings us to Section 4, the power of collaboration, the detective agency.
So once RareDxR1 is trained and finally deployed into the real world, it doesn't just work alone in a vacuum. The researchers introduced a strategy called collaborative reasoning refinement, or CRR. In practice, this means RareDxR1 acts as a lead physician consulting a board of expert peers. It generates its initial diagnosis, sure, but then it aggregates evidence and gets second opinions from other AI models. It weighs these conflicting perspectives, cross-references them with factual knowledge, and refines its final verdict to mitigate any single model bias.
And when we look at the data, the proof of this collaboration is totally undeniable. On both in and out of distribution datasets, adding more external collaborating models causes a clear upward spike in top 10 recall accuracy. The system gets demonstrably, measurably smarter when it bounces ideas off its peers. To put that into perspective, just look at these numbers. Operating totally standalone, the 14 billion parameter RareDxR1 model already achieves a highly impressive 75.32% top 10 recall on the difficult rare arena test set. But as soon as you add that collaborative reasoning refinement, the accuracy jumps to 78.73%. That is a massive leap in clinical terms, and it literally represents many more patients getting accurately diagnosed.
Which takes us to our final section, a breakthrough in diagnosis, closing the case.
When compared to the rest of the AI landscape out there, RareDxR1 completely dominates the top 10 recall accuracy across every single complex bodily system. We're talking everything from cardiopulmonary and neurological, all the way to genetic and metabolic diseases. It consistently outperforms highly advanced, much larger general models like GPT-4o and Gemini. But honestly, here is the most stunning takeaway of all. When it was tested in a zero-shot setting, which means it was asked to diagnose rare diseases it had never explicitly seen during its training, RareDxR1 achieved a 50% top 10 recall. That utterly crushes the baseline model's 28.85%. This is the ultimate proof right here. The AI didn't just memorize medical textbooks. It actually learned how to think. It internalized the meta-logic of differential diagnosis itself.
So what should we all take away from this? Well, rigorous clinical validation and human oversight will always remain absolutely crucial for patient safety, that's for sure. But this research proves that the era of the AI medical detective has truly arrived. It's learning from its mistakes, it's collaborating with peers, and it's mastering the underlying logic of medicine. Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to ponder. With AI mastering the logic of rare disease diagnosis to this degree, how soon will your doctor's most trusted second opinion be an algorithm?